They loved you once, but now every word feels like a burden. Every touch feels like a lie. What changed? You can feel it. The coldness creeping in like a disease, the indifference masked by hollow smiles and forced conversations. When someone stops loving you, they don't say it. They show it. And the signs are brutally clear if you dare to see them. The truth is, most people choose to be blind to the obvious, clinging to fragments of affection instead of facing the raw, unfiltered reality that love has died and they've already moved on emotionally. It's devastating. You replay every conversation, every look, searching for clues, praying it's all just paranoia. But it's not. It's happening. And unless you confront it, you'll be trapped in a spiral of false hope and emotional decay. The Stoics understood this torment long before you did. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you." But acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It means arming yourself with the brutal truth, tearing through illusions, and standing firm when everything around you collapses. What you're about to hear isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to shatter your illusions, to wake you up from the delusion that love is something you can force or negotiate. Prepare yourself, because the truth is cold, but it's also liberating. This is Victory Stoic, where we turn pain into power, where we confront the darkness instead of running from it. If you're ready to face the truth and rebuild yourself from the ground up, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your story or just one word: awake. Because admitting the truth is the first step toward reclaiming your power. Let's begin. Number 1. They no longer share their inner world with you. When someone stops loving you, one of the first and most telling signs is their unwillingness to share their inner world. Thoughts, dreams, fears, and those little details of everyday life that once bound you together now remain locked away. The conversations that used to flow effortlessly are now stunted, clinical, devoid of genuine connection. And this withdrawal, subtle yet profound, is often more devastating than words of rejection. Elias had been married to Liana for 8 years. They had their routines, their inside jokes, their late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours. They would talk about everything, from childhood memories to their frustrations at work, from philosophical musings to trivialities like what they wanted for dinner. It was their bond, their ritual. But Elias began noticing the change gradually, like a slow leak in a ship that eventually sinks it. Liana's responses grew shorter, her laughter less frequent. Her phone became a place of retreat, her mind seemingly occupied by thoughts she never bothered to share. The depth was gone. They still talked, but only about logistics, picking up groceries, managing bills, schedules, functional words stripped of warmth and authenticity. One night, Elias asked her how her day went. She replied with a dismissive, "Fine," her eyes glued to the television. He pressed, asking if anything interesting had happened at work. "Not really," she said, already drifting away from the conversation. He could feel the distance like a physical presence between them, thick and unyielding. According to psychologist Dr. John Gottman, one of the most prominent researchers on marital stability and divorce prediction, the breakdown of communication is a critical indicator of relational failure. His studies at the Gottman Institute show that couples who eventually separate often exhibit patterns of withdrawal, emotional disengagement, and a failure to communicate personal thoughts and feelings. When one partner ceases to share their inner world, it signifies a deeper problem, a lack of emotional intimacy. And emotional intimacy, Gottman asserts, is the very foundation upon which lasting relationships are built. From a Stoic perspective, this phenomenon is not just predictable, but inevitable. Epictetus taught that men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. In the context of relationships, the suffering one feels from emotional withdrawal isn't just about the absence of connection. It's about the meaning you assign to that absence. If you interpret their lack of sharing as a sign of personal failure or unworthiness, you will spiral into unnecessary anguish. But if you accept it as a natural, albeit painful, shift in the dynamics of the relationship, you gain the power to act rationally rather than react emotionally. The Stoics believed in focusing on what is within your control. You cannot force someone to open up or to share their thoughts and emotions. The harder you push, the more they will retreat. Instead, Epictetus would suggest that you focus on how you choose to interpret their withdrawal. Is it an attack on your worth, or is it a reflection of their own internal struggles, completely separate from your value as a person? Acceptance does not mean indifference. It means acknowledging reality without being shattered by it. Consider another example. Natalie and her boyfriend Aaron had been together for 3 years. In the beginning, their conversations were rich with passion and curiosity. They'd discuss everything from art to politics to personal insecurities. Natalie loved how Aaron would open up to her about his dreams and fears, his desire to switch careers, his lingering doubts about whether he was truly living a meaningful life. But then, Aaron began to change. His responses became generic, disinterested. When Natalie asked how he was feeling, he'd brush her off with phrases like, "I'm fine," or "just tired." The truth was, Aaron had begun to internalize his stress and doubts, locking them away rather than sharing them with Natalie. The withdrawal was not deliberate cruelty. It was a defense mechanism. As psychologist Dr. Brené Brown explains, vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. When someone stops sharing their inner world, it's often because they feel unsafe or misunderstood. Fear of judgment, rejection, or even just exhaustion from daily life can cause a person to shut down. This insight aligns closely with the teachings of the Stoics. Epictetus emphasized the importance of focusing on your own actions and perceptions rather than trying to control others. He would argue that Aaron's withdrawal is something Natalie cannot control and therefore should not cause her suffering. Instead, she should seek clarity in her own emotions and responses. But how do you apply this knowledge practically? How do you confront the painful truth of someone's withdrawal without allowing it to consume you? Tip to implement at home. 1. Reflect without blame. Write down your observations of their behavior without assigning fault or blame. Instead of writing, "They don't care about me," write, "They have not shared their thoughts with me recently." This subtle shift helps you see the situation more objectively, freeing you from unnecessary emotional suffering. 2. Journal your thoughts. Inspired by Marcus Aurelius's meditations, keep a daily journal where you honestly express your thoughts, fears, and emotions. This practice is not about venting, but about understanding. By putting your pain into words, you give it structure and clarity. 3. Reframe your perspective. Remind yourself daily of Epictetus's words. It is not the things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about these things. Internalize the idea that their withdrawal is not necessarily a judgment of your worth. 4. Engage in independent growth. Focus on activities that nurture your personal growth, whether it's reading, exercising, building new skills, or reconnecting with friends. The goal is not to distract yourself from pain, but to build resilience and a renewed sense of self-worth. Ultimately, if someone no longer shares their inner world with you, the harsh reality is that their emotional investment has diminished. You can't force them to care, and you shouldn't degrade yourself by trying. What you can do is reclaim your power by accepting the truth and choosing how you will respond to it. The Stoics understood that acceptance is not surrender, it is liberation. Number 2, relentless criticism. When affection dies, criticism takes its place. What was once charming and endearing now becomes a source of irritation and frustration. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It is a gradual erosion, like a relentless tide washing away the sand of intimacy and understanding. Relentless criticism is one of the most insidious indicators that someone has emotionally checked out. And what's worse, it often leaves you questioning your own worth. Consider Ethan and Rachel. They had been dating for 5 years, and for most of that time, Rachel adored Ethan's creativity. She praised his artistic projects, encouraged his ambitions, and admired his passion for filmmaking. But over time, her admiration turned sour. She began to see his devotion to his craft as selfishness. His late nights editing footage were no longer seen as dedication, but as negligence toward their relationship. Rachel's complaints became frequent, sharp, and personal. "You care more about your stupid films than about us," she'd snap. "You're just a child chasing dreams." Ethan, caught off guard by the intensity of her criticism, found himself constantly defending his passion, explaining his process, apologizing for what he loved. His creativity, once a source of joy and connection, now felt like a burden, something to be hidden or excused. From a psychological standpoint, criticism is often a projection of unresolved dissatisfaction. As Dr. John Gottman's research into marital stability reveals, criticism is one of the 4 horsemen that predict relationship breakdown. Unlike complaints, which are about specific issues, criticism is about attacking someone's character or core identity. It's no longer about what the person does, it's about who they are. For Rachel, her dissatisfaction had deeper roots than Ethan's dedication to his art. She felt neglected, emotionally isolated, and instead of expressing her vulnerability, she chose to attack. Criticism became her shield, her method of deflecting her own pain. Instead of saying, "I feel left out when you spend all your time on your films," she said, "You're selfish and immature." The Stoics understood this dynamic well. Epictetus observed, "When someone criticizes you, it is not their criticism that harms you, but your judgment of it." His point was simple. Criticism only holds power over you if you allow it to. It is your perception, your reaction, that creates suffering. When relentless criticism emerges in a relationship, it's essential to recognize 2 things. First, criticism is often a reflection of the critic's inner turmoil. Second, you have control over how you choose to interpret and respond to it. To continue with Ethan's story, he spent months feeling torn between his passion and his relationship. Every new project was overshadowed by Rachel's accusations. Every creative victory was met with resentment rather than celebration. It was only after discovering the writings of Marcus Aurelius that Ethan began to shift his perspective. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Ethan started to see Rachel's words not as objective truths, but as her subjective reality. He couldn't control her dissatisfaction or her way of expressing it. but he could control his own mind. Instead of reacting defensively, Ethan began to listen more deeply, not to the harshness of Rachel's words, but to the pain underlying them. He realized that her attacks were not about him, but about her own unmet emotional needs. This didn't justify her cruelty, but it clarified the situation. With this newfound perspective, Ethan stopped feeling the need to justify his passion. Instead, he focused on expressing his thoughts and emotions clearly, without anger or resentment. He no longer took Rachel's criticism as an indictment of his character, and in time, he made the decision to walk away from a relationship that had become poisoned by resentment and judgment. Now, it's important to understand that not all criticism is inherently bad. Constructive criticism, given with kindness and a genuine desire to improve the relationship, is valuable. But when criticism becomes relentless, when it turns personal and unforgiving, it's a sign that something has broken. From a Stoic perspective, the most critical step you can take is to reclaim your emotional sovereignty. You cannot control what another person says or thinks about you. You can only control your response. This concept is the essence of Epictetus's teachings. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Tips to apply. At home. 1. Pause before responding. When you're confronted with criticism, especially harsh or unwarranted criticism, take a moment to breathe before reacting. The Stoics believed that a moment's reflection can prevent a lifetime of regret. Ask yourself, is this criticism valid, or is it simply a reflection of the other person's frustration? 2. Reframe the criticism. Instead of immediately defending yourself, try to understand the core of what is being said. Sometimes there is truth in criticism, even if it is delivered harshly, but often it is rooted in the other person's pain rather than your own flaws. 3. Journal your emotions. Inspired by Marcus Aurelius's meditations, write down their criticism and your emotional reaction to it. By putting your thoughts into words, you gain clarity and distance from the initial sting. Set boundaries. When criticism becomes relentless and destructive, it's essential to protect your peace of mind. If the person continues to attack you rather than address their own issues, consider distancing yourself emotionally or even physically. 5. Reflect on what you can control. Remember, you cannot change another person's behavior or perceptions, but you can choose how you interpret their words and what weight you give them. Relentless criticism is a sign of emotional decay within a relationship. When someone has lost love for you, they will often try to justify their withdrawal by finding fault in everything you do. But their criticisms are not your reality. They are expressions of their own discontent, their own inner chaos. By recognizing this, you reclaim your power. By refusing to internalize their judgment, you rise above it. Number 3, abandoning effort. One of the most painful signs that someone has lost love for you is their complete abandonment of effort. The gestures of care, the attempts to bridge gaps, the desire to nourish the relationship, everything vanishes. Where there was once enthusiasm, there is now only indifference. The problem is not merely the absence of effort, but the apathy that consumes everything the relationship once stood for. A relationship, like anything of value, requires consistent effort to thrive. When effort dies, love follows. And when love dies, the most intimate moments are reduced to mere formalities. Or worse, they disappear altogether. Valentine's Day used to be a special occasion for Amanda and Jake. In the early years of their relationship, Jake would plan elaborate dates, candlelit dinners, handwritten letters, flowers waiting at her doorstep. It wasn't about the money or extravagance, but the effort, the intention to make her feel cherished. But as time went on, something shifted. Last Valentine's Day, Amanda came home to find Jake slouched on the couch, eyes fixed on his phone. No flowers, no dinner, not even a simple acknowledgement of the day. When she gently asked if they were doing anything special, he replied with a dismissive grunt, "It's just another day. Why make a big deal out of it?" The words stung, not because of their harshness, but because of their emptiness. It was the absence of effort, the blatant lack of care, that felt like a dagger twisting in her chest. Birthdays were no different. On Amanda's most recent birthday, there was no cake, no candles, no thoughtful gift. Jake had forgotten entirely until she mentioned it. His apology was casual, almost robotic, a vague excuse about being busy with work. And though he tried to make up for it later with a rushed dinner out, the damage was already done. The effort was gone, replaced by obligation and apathy. Amanda began noticing other signs. Jake never changed his style anymore. He wore the same faded jeans and wrinkled shirts day after day. His wardrobe, once filled with neatly folded clothes, now looked like a graveyard of neglected garments. Dust collected on shoes he never wore, shirts left in piles, creased beyond repair. Apathy had seeped into his own self-care, reflecting his diminishing effort, not only towards their relationship, but toward life itself. When they first started dating, Jake used to care about how he looked. He would experiment with hairstyles, buy new clothes, surprise her with little changes, just to see her smile. Now, he had settled into a stagnant, uninspired routine. It wasn't about appearance. It was about the absence of effort, the refusal to try. It was the slow decay of passion, manifesting in every neglected detail. Epictetus wrote, "Difficulties are what show men's characters." The Stoics believed that adversity is the test of one's will, but so is stagnation. When someone no longer puts effort into the relationship, they have already resigned themselves to failure. What they are telling you, without words, is that you are not worth the effort. Or perhaps more accurately, that they no longer care whether you believe you are worth it or not. The absence of effort is not always deliberate. It can be the result of emotional fatigue, personal struggles, or a loss of passion that the person cannot articulate. But from the Stoic perspective, it is your perception of this neglect that determines your suffering. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this, you have the power to revoke at any moment." Amanda spent months obsessing over Jake's negligence, his lack of effort, his unwillingness to even try. Every forgotten birthday, every dismissed holiday, every unacknowledged attempt at intimacy felt like a personal attack. She questioned her own worth, wondering if somehow she was the problem. But the truth was simpler, though far harsher. Jake had stopped caring. He had abandoned the effort that once defined their relationship. Accepting this reality was not easy, but Amanda eventually realized that clinging to a broken relationship was like trying to breathe life into a dead flame. Instead of demanding more effort from Jake, she turned her attention inward. The Stoics believed in focusing on what is within one's control, and Amanda's control over Jake's actions had always been an illusion. What she could control, however, was her own effort, her own dedication to growth and improvement. Tip to apply. At home. 1. Stop chasing their effort. When someone stops trying, do not humiliate yourself by demanding attention or affection. Instead, accept their apathy for what it is. Their lack of effort is not a reflection of your value, but of their disinterest. 2. Invest in yourself. Channel the energy you once poured into the relationship into your own self-improvement. Take up new hobbies, develop your skills, and work on your physical and mental well-being. 3. Redefine effort. Recognize that effort is not about grand gestures, but about consistency, care, and attention. If they have ceased to put in effort, do not waste your own by trying to force a change. Declutter your life. Just as Jake's wardrobe became a graveyard of neglected clothes, relationships can accumulate emotional clutter. Remove what no longer serves you. Let go of the memories that only bring pain. 5. Journal your experience. Inspired by Marcus Aurelius's practice, keep a daily journal where you reflect on what effort means to you and how you can apply it to your own life, regardless of their actions. Abandoning effort is a form of silent betrayal. It is a message sent not through words, but through neglect. But it is also a message you can choose not to internalize. Just as you cannot control another person's actions, you cannot force them to care. What you can do is reclaim your own power, focus on your own effort, and rebuild your life without them. As the Stoics would remind you, acceptance is the first step to liberation. Number 4. Losing patience. When love begins to fade, so does patience. The kindness that once buffered every disagreement erodes away, replaced by irritation and resentment. Losing patience is not just about snapping at small mistakes or expressing annoyance over trivial things. It's about the abandonment of understanding and compassion. What was once a gentle correction now becomes a harsh criticism. What was once a playful disagreement now escalates into a bitter argument. Jessica and Daniel had been married for 9 years. In the early years of their relationship, Daniel would listen to Jessica's long, winding stories about her day at work, her frustrations with colleagues, her aspirations. He found joy in her enthusiasm, even when her complaints seemed petty or her thoughts scattered. But over time, Daniel's patience wore thin. The same stories that once amused him now annoyed him. He would cut her off mid-sentence, roll his eyes, or worse, dismiss her entirely. One night, Jessica tried to share a frustrating experience at work. Daniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "Can you just get to the point? I don't have all night." Jessica's words faltered. The pain of his impatience cut deeper than the stress of her job. She felt dismissed, insignificant. What Daniel failed to realize was that his impatience was not just a rejection of her words, it was a rejection of her. Psychologically, impatience often signals emotional withdrawal. According to Dr. John Gottman's research, contempt and impatience are two of the strongest predictors of relationship breakdown. When one partner grows impatient, it's often because their emotional investment has waned. They no longer value the other person's thoughts, concerns, or presence. Impatience becomes a symptom of deeper dissatisfaction, a subtle way of expressing resentment without acknowledging it directly. From a Stoic perspective, impatience is a flaw of perception. Epictetus wrote, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them." Daniel's impatience was not caused by Jessica's words, but by his own interpretation of them. He had allowed his expectations to narrow, his tolerance to shrink. Instead of seeing Jessica's sharing as a form of connection, He saw it as a burden, and by doing so, he poisoned his own peace of mind. The Stoics believed that patience was a virtue because it reflected control over one's emotions and thoughts. Losing patience with someone often reveals a lack of control over oneself. It is the mind's failure to align expectations with reality. When Daniel grew impatient, he was not only disrespecting Jessica, he was losing control of his own emotional state. Tip to apply. At home. Practice conscious listening. When someone you care about is speaking, make a deliberate effort to listen without interrupting or rushing them. Approach their words with curiosity, not judgment. 2. Reframe your perception. Instead of seeing their words as an inconvenience, view them as an opportunity to understand them more deeply. Remind yourself of Epictetus's wisdom. Your frustration stems from your own interpretation, not their words. 3. Journal your reactions. Track moments of impatience and examine why you felt that way. Were your expectations unrealistic? Were you distracted or preoccupied? Understanding your own patterns can help you regain control over them. Communicate openly. If impatience arises from a genuine issue, address it with kindness and clarity rather than irritation. Discussing your feelings openly can prevent resentment from festering. 5. Embrace patience as strength. Recognize that patience is not weakness, it is mastery over one's own emotions. It is the power to remain calm, even when circumstances are less than ideal. Losing patience is not just a sign of frustration, it's a sign of emotional distance. When someone no longer has the patience to hear your thoughts, to engage with your concerns, or even to tolerate your presence, it's a warning that their affection has eroded. The Stoics understood this well. True strength lies not in demanding perfection from others, but in mastering one's own reactions. 5. Loss of intimacy, avoidance, emotional indifference. The death of intimacy rarely arrives as a sudden blow. It fades like a distant echo, growing weaker until it becomes almost unnoticeable. When someone stops loving you, their desire for intimacy, whether emotional or physical, dwindles to nothing. Moments that once held passion, warmth, and closeness become mechanical, or worse, absent altogether. Intimacy is not just about physical touch. It's about shared experiences, vulnerable conversations, emotional safety. When intimacy dies, the person you once felt closest to becomes a stranger. You reach for them only to find coldness, where warmth once existed. Mason and Olivia had been together for 5 years. In the early stages of their relationship, they couldn't keep their hands off each other. Even simple gestures, like holding hands while walking or resting against each other while watching a movie, felt natural and effortless. Their emotional intimacy was equally strong. Olivia would share her deepest fears, her wildest dreams. Mason would reciprocate with stories of his own past, his insecurities, his ambitions. But things changed. It began subtly. Olivia stopped reaching for Mason's hand during their walks. Her goodnight kisses became quick, obligatory, devoid of affection. And Mason, sensing her distance, grew frustrated and resentful. Whenever he tried to discuss their lack of intimacy, Olivia would avoid the conversation altogether. "I'm just tired," she'd say. Or, "It's not a big deal. You're overthinking." The emotional avoidance was even more damaging than the loss of physical intimacy. Mason would share something deeply personal, only to be met with indifference or a dismissive shrug. The closeness that had once defined their relationship had been replaced by a frigid, emotional distance. Olivia's unwillingness to engage in meaningful conversations left Mason feeling isolated, unimportant. This kind of emotional disconnection is common in relationships that are deteriorating. According to Dr. Sue Johnson, a clinical psychologist and leading expert on attachment theory, emotional unavailability is one of the most devastating experiences a person can endure within a relationship. When one partner consistently avoids intimacy, Dr. Johnson explains, the other feels abandoned, unloved, and ultimately rejected. Emotional indifference often manifests as avoidance, dodging difficult conversations, neglecting affection, refusing to acknowledge the other person's pain. The partner who has lost love chooses comfort over confrontation, silence over sincerity. The effort required to maintain intimacy feels burdensome, unnecessary. Epictetus wrote, "He who is not a good servant will not be a good master." In relationships, this wisdom translates to the idea that genuine intimacy requires effort, humility, and consistency. When someone stops loving you, they abandon that effort. They retreat into themselves, leaving you to battle against the coldness of their indifference. Marcus Aurelius also observed, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." For Mason, this meant recognizing that Olivia's emotional withdrawal was beyond his control. Her loss of interest in their shared intimacy was not a reflection of his value, but of her own emotional state. By choosing to internalize her rejection, Mason was surrendering his own peace of mind. Intimacy cannot be forced, and clinging to someone who has lost all desire for connection only deepens the wound. As the Stoics teach, the pain is not in the event itself, but in how we perceive and respond to it. Mason's suffering did not come from Olivia's indifference. It came from his refusal to accept that her affection had faded. Tip to apply. At home. First, stop seeking what they can't offer. If someone has lost their desire for intimacy, chasing after it will only lead to greater pain. Acknowledge their emotional withdrawal as reality, rather than something to be fixed. 2. Reflect on your own needs. What kind of intimacy do you desire? What do you truly need to feel fulfilled? Journaling or meditative reflection can help you clarify your own expectations. 3. Communicate clearly. Instead of pleading for attention, calmly express how their withdrawal impacts you. If they refuse to engage, recognize that their choice is beyond your control. 4. Focus on self-intimacy. Develop a deeper relationship with yourself. Practice mindfulness, pursue passions, and nurture your own well-being. The Stoics believed that fulfillment comes from within, not from external validation. Establish boundaries. If their emotional indifference becomes toxic, it's essential to protect your own mental health. Recognize when it's time to let go. Loss of intimacy, avoidance, and emotional indifference are not isolated issues. They are symptoms of something far deeper, something that may be beyond repair. The Stoics understood that clinging to what no longer exists only deepens the suffering. By accepting the truth, you reclaim your power. By embracing your own resilience, you break free from the chains of false hope. Conclusion. The end of a relationship rarely announces itself with dramatic fights or clear declarations. More often, it erodes slowly through lost intimacy, relentless criticism, emotional indifference, and abandoned effort. It seeps into the quiet moments, the unsaid words, the withdrawn touches. And when the person you once shared everything with begins to shut you out, it feels like a betrayal, more profound than outright rejection. It feels like you're slowly being erased from their life. The Stoics understood that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You cannot force someone to stay. You cannot force someone to care. And most importantly, you cannot force someone to love you when their heart has already departed. What you can do is reclaim your power, rebuild yourself, and transform your pain into strength. Acceptance is not surrender. It is a recognition of reality. When you accept the truth without resentment, without false hope, you allow yourself to heal. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together. But do so with all your heart. But when they leave, you must also let them go with all your heart." If this video resonated with you, if you found strength in these words, then you already understand the power of acceptance and resilience. Subscribe to Victory Stoic for more wisdom rooted in Stoic philosophy and practical insights to help you reclaim your peace of mind. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth. Like the video to support the channel. And most importantly, comment below with your own story or simply write, "I choose strength." Let's build a community of those who refuse to be broken by rejection or loss. Thank you for listening. Your journey doesn't end here. This is only the beginning.